On March 22, 2023, in the quiet suburban community of Stone Mountain, Georgia, 42-year-old Denise Williams clocked out of her nursing shift at Grady Memorial Hospital at exactly 3:30 p.m. The afternoon sun filtered through the hospital windows as she completed her final patient rounds, her white sneakers squeaking softly against the polished linoleum floors. For 15 years, Denise had walked these same corridors, earning a reputation as the nurse who genuinely cared about every person under her watch. Denise was more than just a healthcare worker. She was a beacon of hope for families during their darkest moments. Her colleagues knew her as the single mother who would stay hours past her shift to hold the hand of a frightened patient or explain complex medical procedures to worried relatives. This dedication wasn't professional duty. It was who Denise was at her core. She had built her entire identity around healing others and protecting those she loved. This routine end-of-shift ritual was something Denise had performed thousands of times over her decade-and-a-half career. She would check each patient one final time, update the incoming night staff, and ensure every detail was perfect before leaving. According to her supervisor, Margaret Chen, this was completely normal behavior for Denise. She never left until she knew her patients were comfortable and safe. Margaret would later tell investigators. At 3:45 p.m., Denise gathered her worn leather purse, said her usual goodbyes to the evening shift nurses, and walked toward the employee parking garage. She waved to the security guard, pressed the elevator button, and stepped inside. The metal doors closed behind her with a soft mechanical hum. It would be the last time her co-workers would ever see Denise Williams alive. Denise had a strict routine that everyone in her life knew by heart. She would leave the hospital by 3:45 p.m. and arrive home by 4:30 p.m. sharp to check on her 17-year-old daughter Kaya. This wasn't just maternal concern. It was a carefully structured system that had kept their household running smoothly for years. Kaya was expected to be home from Holy Spirit Preparatory Academy by 4 p.m., and Denise's arrival 30 minutes later served as both a safety check and quality time together. But at 3:47 p.m. that Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. A frantic 911 call came through the DeKalb County Emergency Dispatch System. The caller, claiming to be a concerned neighbor, reported a violent attack at the Williams family home on Maple Ridge Drive. "Please send help immediately." The voice pleaded through what sounded like tears. "I heard screaming from next door and found the front door wide open. There's a woman inside who's been hurt badly." The emergency dispatcher immediately sent units to the address, while simultaneously trying to gather more information from the increasingly hysterical caller. What made this call particularly urgent was the caller's claim that the victim appeared to be a healthcare worker based on the medical scrubs scattered near the entrance. The dispatcher had no way of knowing that at that exact moment, the real Denise Williams was still driving home from her shift, completely unaware that her address was being broadcast across police radios throughout the county. Within minutes, the call had reached multiple people who cared deeply about Denise Williams. Her hospital colleagues heard the address over their emergency scanner and immediately recognized it. Her neighbors began gathering outside their homes, worried about the woman who always waved good morning and brought them homemade cookies during holidays. And somewhere in that chaos, 17-year-old Kaya Williams was waiting. DeKalb County Police units arrived at the Williams home on Maple Ridge Drive within 8 minutes of the emergency call. Officers Marcus Johnson and Lisa Rodriguez were the first responders, expecting to find the aftermath of a violent home invasion based on the dispatcher's report. They approached the modest 3-bedroom townhouse with weapons drawn, noting that the front door was indeed standing wide open as the caller had described. The officers immediately began their standard protocol for a reported break-in and assault. They secured the perimeter, called for backup, and began searching for signs of forced entry around all possible access points. Officer Johnson examined the front door frame for tool marks or damage, while Officer Rodriguez checked the rear sliding door and ground floor windows. Their initial sweep revealed what appeared to be a struggle in the living room: overturned furniture, scattered papers, and a broken picture frame on the hardwood floor. Within 20 minutes, the crime scene unit arrived along with Detective Sarah Mitchell, a 12-year veteran of the DeKalb County Police Department. The team began their methodical documentation process, photographing every angle of the supposed crime scene and collecting potential evidence. They searched for missing valuables, checked jewelry boxes, and looked for any items that might have been taken during the alleged invasion. Detective Mitchell conducted preliminary interviews with neighbors who had gathered outside, trying to establish a timeline of events. But as the investigation progressed, something felt fundamentally wrong to Detective Mitchell. The scene before her didn't match the frantic description from the 911 call. Where was the victim who had supposedly been attacked? Where was the blood that should have been present from such a violent assault? The overturned furniture seemed almost too perfectly arranged, and the broken items appeared to have been placed rather than scattered naturally. Most troubling of all, there was no sign of Denise Williams anywhere in the house. Detective Mitchell's experienced eye immediately caught details that didn't align with the typical home invasion. There were no pry marks on any doors or windows, no shattered glass from forced entry, and no muddy footprints despite the recent rain that afternoon. The lock on the front door showed no signs of tampering, and the security system's main panel was intact but mysteriously offline. This wasn't adding up to the violent break-in described in the emergency call. When 17-year-old Kaya Williams arrived at the scene, claiming she had just returned from school, her timeline immediately raised red flags. She told officers she had been at Holy Spirit Preparatory Academy until 3:45 p.m., then stopped at a friend's house before coming home around 4:15 p.m. However, Detective Mitchell quickly discovered that Kaya's last two classes had been marked as absences, and the friend she claimed to visit had no record of seeing her that afternoon. The most puzzling discovery came when technicians examined the home's security system. The Williams family had installed a comprehensive camera system just 6 months earlier, with devices covering all entry points and main living areas. Yet somehow, every single camera had been disabled between 2:30 and 3:30 p.m. that day. The system showed no signs of external tampering, suggesting someone with intimate knowledge of the setup had deliberately shut it down from the inside. As Detective Mitchell processed these inconsistencies, a call came through that changed everything. Denise Williams had been found deceased in her car in the hospital parking garage, apparently having never made it home. The case was immediately reclassified from home invasion to suspicious death, and suddenly Kaya Williams transformed from a potential victim into the primary person of interest. The teenager who had been crying about her missing mother now faced a completely different set of questions. Before we go any deeper into this twisted case that shocked the entire Stone Mountain community, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. What happens next will completely change how you view the story, and trust me, you don't want to miss a single detail of how this deception falls apart. The evidence that investigators found next would reveal a level of planning that even seasoned detectives had never encountered before. So smash that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and let's continue uncovering the truth behind one of Georgia's most disturbing family crimes. In the weeks following Denise Williams' death, the investigation took a frustrating turn that would haunt Detective Mitchell for months. Despite the inconsistencies at the crime scene, the focus shifted toward external suspects who might have had reason to harm the beloved nurse. The department received dozens of tips about disgruntled former patients, ex-boyfriends from Denise's past, and even theories about random violence targeting healthcare workers. Each lead consumed valuable time and resources, while the real perpetrator remained hidden in plain sight. Kaya Williams delivered what could only be described as an Oscar-worthy performance as the grieving daughter. She attended every press conference with red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands, speaking about her mother's dedication to helping others and her own devastation at losing her only parent. Local news stations featured heart-wrenching interviews where Kaya described finding their home in chaos and fearing for her mother's safety. Her composure during these appearances was remarkable. She never contradicted herself, never showed inappropriate emotions, and always redirected attention back to finding her mother's killer. The Stone Mountain community rallied around what they perceived as a traumatized teenager who had lost everything. Holy Spirit Preparatory Academy organized fundraisers for Kaya's college expenses, and Grady Memorial Hospital staff contributed to a memorial fund in Denise's honor. Local churches provided meals, counseling services, and emotional support for the girl they believed was an innocent victim of senseless violence. Even Detective Mitchell found herself feeling protective of Kaya during those early weeks, admiring the teenager's apparent strength in the face of unimaginable loss. As March turned into April, the investigation seemed to hit one dead end after another. The forensic evidence from the staged crime scene yielded no useful DNA or fingerprints from unknown individuals. Security footage from the hospital showed Denise leaving work normally, with no signs of being followed or threatened. Her phone records revealed nothing suspicious, and her financial accounts showed no unusual activity. The case file grew thicker with false leads and eliminated suspects, while the real answers remained frustratingly out of reach. Detective Mitchell began to question her own instincts about the inconsistencies she had noticed. Perhaps the scene had been disturbed by Kaya's panic upon discovering it. Maybe the security cameras had malfunctioned coincidentally. The pressure from her superiors to solve the case was mounting, but every avenue seemed to lead nowhere. For nearly 6 weeks, it appeared that whoever had killed Denise Williams might actually get away with the perfect crime. While the investigation stalled, Kaya Williams began making changes to her life that would later seem deeply troubling in retrospect. Within 3 weeks of her mother's funeral, she had effectively gained the freedom she had always craved. The strict 9 p.m. curfew disappeared, the phone monitoring ended, and the constant check-ins became a thing of the past. Kaya moved in temporarily with her Aunt Patricia, who was too overwhelmed with grief to maintain the structured environment that Denise had carefully created. The most significant change came in early May when Kaya openly began dating Jamal Thompson, the 19-year-old community college student her mother had forbidden her to see. What made this particularly striking was how quickly she transitioned from grieving daughter to carefree teenager. Neighbors noticed her laughing and holding hands with Jamal just weeks after burying her mother. When questioned about the relationship, Kaya explained that her mother would have wanted her to find happiness and move forward with her life. Financial discussions began almost immediately after the funeral, though they were handled delicately given Kaya's apparent emotional state. Denise had maintained a modest life insurance policy through the hospital, worth $50,000, with Kaya as the sole beneficiary. Additionally, there was a college fund containing nearly $30,000 that Denise had been building for years through overtime shifts and careful budgeting. Kaya's Aunt Patricia helped her navigate the paperwork, believing she was protecting her traumatized niece from additional stress during an already difficult time. Red flags began emerging in subtle ways that initially went unnoticed by those around her. Kaya's grief seemed to follow a convenient schedule. She was devastated during public appearances and interviews, but neighbors occasionally spotted her laughing and acting normally when she thought no one was watching. Her social media activity, while carefully curated, showed glimpses of a teenager who seemed to be thriving rather than mourning. She posted photos of new clothes, restaurant visits with Jamal, and college preparation activities with captions about living life to the fullest and making mom proud. The performance was so convincing that even trained professionals missed the warning signs. School counselors praised Kaya's resilience, church members admired her strength, and family friends commented on how well she was handling her loss. Her ability to compartmentalize her emotions and present exactly what each audience expected to see was nothing short of masterful. For nearly 2 months, Kaya Williams had successfully convinced everyone that she was the perfect grieving daughter. On May 15, 2023, nearly 8 weeks after Denise Williams' death, a routine procedure at the DeKalb County Police Department's Digital Forensics Lab would crack the case wide open. Tech specialist Amanda Rodriguez was conducting a standard analysis of Kaya's phone as part of the ongoing investigation, primarily looking for any communications that might reveal external threats against her mother. This was considered a formality at this point, as Kaya remained viewed as a victim rather than a suspect. During the routine examination, Rodriguez discovered something that made her pause and called Detective Mitchell immediately. Hidden deep within Kaya's phone applications was a voice-changing app called VoiceMorph Pro that had been downloaded on March 20th, just 2 days before her mother's death. The app was designed to alter vocal patterns in real time during phone calls, and its recent usage logs showed activity on March 22nd at exactly 3:46 p.m., just 1 minute before the emergency call was placed. This discovery prompted Detective Mitchell to request a comprehensive analysis of the original 911 call that had started the entire investigation. Audio specialist Dr. Marcus Thompson from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was brought in to examine the voice patterns and background sounds from the emergency recording. Using advanced software, he began comparing the distressed caller's voice to known recordings of Kaya Williams from her school presentations and media interviews. The results were shocking. Despite the emotional distortion and apparent panic in the emergency call, Dr. Thompson identified several vocal markers that matched Kaya's speech patterns. The caller's pronunciation of certain words, the rhythm of their sentences, and even subtle breathing patterns aligned with Kaya's natural speaking voice. Most damning was a brief moment in the call where the voice-changing effect seemed to glitch, revealing what sounded distinctly like a teenage girl rather than an adult neighbor. But the breakthrough didn't stop there. When investigators examined the timing more carefully, they realized the emergency call had been placed at 3:47 p.m., while Denise Williams was still alive and driving home from the hospital. Security footage from Grady Memorial showed Denise leaving the parking garage at 3:52 p.m., a full 5 minutes after someone had already reported finding her injured at home. This timeline impossibility meant that whoever made that call knew Denise wasn't actually at the house yet. The pieces were finally starting to fall into place. The voice-changing app, the impossible timeline, and the perfectly staged crime scene all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Kaya Williams hadn't discovered a crime scene. She had created one. The grieving daughter, who had fooled an entire community, was actually the architect of her mother's death. Detective Mitchell realized they had been investigating the wrong crime entirely. The discovery of the voice-changing app opened a floodgate of evidence that had been hiding in plain sight. Detective Mitchell immediately obtained a comprehensive search warrant for all of Kaya's digital devices, social media accounts, and internet activity. What the forensics team found over the next 72 hours would reveal a level of premeditation that shocked even experienced investigators. Kaya hadn't acted in a moment of rage. She had been planning her mother's death for weeks. Her internet search history painted a disturbing picture of calculated research. Starting in early March, Kaya had been searching for terms like, how long do police take to respond to emergency calls, voice-changing apps that work, and how to disable home security cameras without detection. She had researched her mother's work schedule, studied emergency dispatch protocols, and even looked up information about life insurance policies and inheritance laws for minors in Georgia. The evidence chain continued to build as investigators recovered deleted text messages between Kaya and Jamal Thompson. While Jamal appeared unaware of Kaya's deadly intentions, the messages revealed her growing resentment toward her mother's control. She thinks she owns me, Kaya had written on March 10th. I can't wait until I'm free to live my own life. Another message from March 18th was even more chilling. Don't worry, babe. Soon nothing will be able to keep us apart. Kaya's carefully constructed alibi began crumbling under scrutiny. School attendance records confirmed she had skipped her last 2 classes on March 22nd, giving her ample time to return home and stage the crime scene. Security footage from a gas station near her school showed her purchasing zip ties and a small toolkit at 2:15 p.m., items that were never found at the crime scene, but matched the type used to disable the home security system. The most damning evidence came from her phone's location data, which told a story completely different from her sworn statement to police. Instead of being at a friend's house as she claimed, Kaya's phone had been at the Williams home from 2:45 p.m. until 4:10 p.m. on the day of the murder. The data showed she had been moving around the house during that time, likely staging the fake break-in and waiting for her mother to arrive. As investigators dug deeper, they discovered that Kaya had even practiced her grieving daughter performance. Her phone contained voice recordings of herself crying and practicing emotional speeches about her mother. She had rehearsed her responses to potential police questions and had even researched how trauma victims typically behave during interviews. The final piece of the puzzle came when Detective Mitchell realized that Kaya had made a critical error in her planning. The teenager had assumed her mother would come straight home after receiving the emergency call, but she hadn't accounted for the fact that Denise would hear the dispatch over the hospital's emergency scanner first. This timing miscalculation had created the impossible timeline that ultimately exposed her elaborate deception. On May 18, 2023, Detective Mitchell arrived at Kaya Williams' temporary residence with an arrest warrant and backup officers. The 17-year-old was taken into custody without incident, though her reaction was telling. Instead of the shock and confusion one might expect from an innocent person, Kaya remained eerily calm and immediately requested a lawyer. Her Aunt Patricia collapsed in disbelief as officers read Kaya her rights, unable to comprehend that the niece she had been protecting was actually her sister's killer. The trial of Kaya Williams began on September 4, 2023, and became one of the most closely watched cases in DeKalb County history. Prosecutor Jennifer Martinez presented a methodical case that laid out the evidence piece by piece, showing the jury exactly how a 17-year-old honor student had planned and executed her mother's murder. The courtroom was packed daily with community members, hospital staff, and media representatives, all struggling to reconcile the image of the grieving daughter they had supported with the cold-blooded killer sitting at the defense table. The prosecution's case was built on the overwhelming digital evidence that had exposed Kaya's deception. Audio specialists testified about the voice-changing app and the vocal pattern matches from the fake emergency call. Digital forensics experts walked the jury through Kaya's internet search history, showing her research into emergency response times and security system vulnerabilities. Cell phone location data proved she had been at home during the time she claimed to be elsewhere, and the deleted text messages revealed her growing resentment toward her mother's authority. Perhaps the most compelling testimony came from Dr. Sarah Chun, a forensic psychologist who had evaluated Kaya during the pretrial period. Dr. Chun explained how Kaya exhibited traits of narcissistic personality disorder and an unusual ability to compartmentalize emotions. She demonstrated an extraordinary capacity for deception and manipulation. Dr. Chun testified, her performance as the grieving daughter was so convincing because she genuinely believed she deserved sympathy and support, even while knowing she was responsible for her mother's death. The defense team, led by attorney Robert Hayes, attempted to argue that Kaya was a traumatized teenager who had been pushed to a breaking point by her mother's excessive control. They presented character witnesses who described Denise as overly strict and painted Kaya as a victim of psychological abuse. However, this strategy backfired when the prosecution called Denise's colleagues and friends, who testified about her dedication as both a mother and healthcare worker. The jury heard story after story about Denise's sacrifices for her daughter and her genuine love for Kaya. The trial's most dramatic moment came when prosecutors played the actual 911 call alongside Kaya's voice recordings found on her phone. The similarities were undeniable, and several jury members visibly reacted to hearing the calculated deception. When the prosecution presented the timelines showing that Kaya had called in a fake emergency while her mother was still alive and driving home, the courtroom fell silent. On October 22, 2023, after deliberating for just 6 hours, the jury returned with their verdict. Kaya Williams was found guilty of first-degree murder, making false statements to police, and tampering with evidence. The community that had once rallied around her sat in stunned silence as the verdict was read. Even some of the jurors were visibly emotional, having been forced to confront the reality that a teenager could plan and execute such a calculated crime against her own mother. The guilty verdict sent shockwaves through Stone Mountain and beyond. Social media exploded with reactions from people who had followed the case, many expressing disbelief that someone so young could be capable of such deception. The case became a cautionary tale about the dangers of assuming innocence based on age and appearance, and it forced many parents to reconsider how well they truly knew their own children. On November 15, 2023, Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Kaya Williams to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. The judge's decision reflected the calculated nature of the crime and the defendant's complete lack of remorse throughout the trial proceedings. This was not a crime of passion, Judge Williams stated during sentencing. This was a deliberate, premeditated murder of a loving mother by a daughter who valued her freedom more than her mother's life. Kaya showed no emotion as the sentence was delivered, maintaining the same cold demeanor that had characterized her courtroom appearances. Denise Williams' legacy at Grady Memorial Hospital became a source of healing for her devastated colleagues. The hospital established the Denise Williams Memorial Fund, which provides scholarships for nursing students from single-parent households. Her former supervisor, Margaret Chin, organized annual blood drives in Denise's honor, and the hospital's family comfort room was renamed in her memory. Denise believed in healing and helping others, Margaret said during the dedication ceremony. Even in death, she continues to make a difference in people's lives. The case forced parents across the country to confront uncomfortable truths about recognizing warning signs in their own children. Child psychologists noted several red flags that had been present in Kaya's behavior: her excessive resentment toward reasonable boundaries, her ability to manipulate different audiences, and her lack of genuine empathy for others' feelings. Dr. Michael Torres, a family therapist, emphasized that while strict parenting doesn't cause violence, parents should watch for children who show no remorse when caught lying or who seem to view relationships as purely transactional. Today, Kaya Williams is serving her sentence at Pulaski State Prison in Georgia, where she will remain until at least 2048. Prison records indicate she has shown no interest in rehabilitation programs and maintains her innocence, despite the overwhelming evidence. She has never expressed remorse for her mother's death or acknowledged the pain she caused to those who loved Denise. If this story has left you questioning how well you know the people closest to you, you're not alone. Make sure to subscribe to Explosive True Crime Stories for more cases that will challenge everything you think you know about human nature. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous person in your life might be the one you least suspect.